Valve is back at it again, shaking up not only the console and PC market, but this time they're releasing a new Steam controller and brand new standalone VR as well, all of which will be releasing in 2026, so not that long from now. Also, sorry if I sound a little stuffy, I got sick in the last couple days. So in case you're wondering, that's why. Valve just announced 3 new pieces of hardware they're making, and boy did they look awesome. Today we'll be going over all the new announcements and the different specs and details of the new devices in order: the Steam controller, Steam machine, aka the gabecube, and then finally the Steam frame. This really seems like it could be a shakeup of the console market, especially with the recent climbing prices of home consoles like the PS5 and Xbox Series X. Before talking about each of the new devices Valve announced, we'll go over a little bit of the history about the original. The first thing we're talking about is the Steam controller. The original Steam controller Valve released 10 years ago alongside the original Steam machine looked kinda weird compared to a standard controller. Not that this new one looks any less weird, but the original Steam controller only had one stick and no D-pad. Instead of the other stick and D-pad, it had 2 trackpads. This probably threw some people off, since most people were probably thinking you need 2 sticks in order to control your games, and there was no D-pad, so what would you do about that? But the thing is, Valve was thinking probably a little too far ahead of their times back in 2015. Controlling your camera or a mouse in your game by using a trackpad with your thumb was probably not something people were comfortable with or thought could even remotely work. But over the years, they've improved their designs and functionality, especially since they released the Steam Deck. Now, we have the new and improved Steam controller. The first thing you'll notice is that it kinda looks like they just chopped the Steam Deck in half, removed the screen bits, and smashed it together, which honestly is a good thing in my opinion. So many people wanted something like this and had just been wondering when they would do it. This controller has the 2 trackpads and dual thumbsticks, both of which are capacitive. One thing I am really excited about is the fact that Valve will be using magnetic TMR joysticks in the Steam controller. Both TMR and Hall effect sticks use magnets to detect inputs instead of potentiometers, so that they're more accurate and way less prone to stick drift since they don't use physical components to detect inputs. I'm not entirely sure the difference between TMR and Hall effect sticks, but what I do know is that TMR sticks use less power to operate, so then your controller gets more battery life. Potentiometers are these little metal bits inside a stick that touch a capacitive pad in order to form a connection and detect your inputs as you use the sticks. But as you use them more, the metal bits and the pads can deteriorate, which is usually what causes stick drift in your controllers. I wish more companies would decide to use TMR and Hall effect sticks in their controllers because it would make them last so much longer. But I guess that's probably the exact reason why they don't use them in their controllers, since they probably want the controllers to break so you'll buy a new one so they can make more money. You know the drill. So that's just another way Valve is beating out the console competitors. This controller also has 4 back buttons on the grip and has what they're calling something like capacitive gyro, which I guess means you'll be able to activate gyro by squeezing the grip of your controller or something like that. Not entirely sure what it is, but it sounds interesting. I really hope that's not the only way to activate gyro though. Like on the Steam Deck, since the sticks are capacitive, you can set gyro to activate like only when you were touching the right stick, for example. So I'm hoping with Steam input that still applies with this controller, since it will be really annoying if that's the only way to activate gyro. Battery life wise, Valve has said that the Steam controller will have more than 35 hours of battery life on a single charge. The main way of charging the controller will be with the new puck they've created for it that also functions as the wireless dongle to connect it to your devices. You'll be able to pair up to 4 Steam controllers to one puck, but obviously you'll have to charge them all separately. The Steam controller will be able to connect to any device that runs Steam and even Steam Link, so you could be able to connect this controller to your phone even to stream your games. The Steam machine will have a built-in receiver for the Steam controller, so you won't need to connect the puck to the gabecube in order to use your Steam controller. Another cool thing Valve has done with this controller is made it so that it'll be able to connect to the Steam frame. It's also able to send out infrared lights that are invisible to human eye but trackable by the headset, so that the headset is able to track where your controller is. This will decrease battery life a little bit since it's using more power to send out those infrared signals, but a cool feature nonetheless. You'll also be able to wirelessly wake up the Steam machine with your Steam controller rather than having to go and press the physical power button on it if you have it set up in your living room, like under your TV for example, because of the use of CEC technology. Valve has officially entered the console market. Kind of. The new Steam machine is technically a small form factor PC, but with SteamOS, I think I'd consider it like the Valve equivalent of a console. This is their answer to the PlayStation and Xbox, and admittedly kind of looks like you just took a hydraulic press or chopped an Xbox Series X in half. The original Steam machines were released a decade ago now, and were usually just small form factor PCs built by other companies that partnered with Valve to use SteamOS as the operating system. SteamOS at this time was not nearly as robust or polished as it is now, and the Proton translation layer didn't work on very many games. So over time, the Steam machine just kind of faded away and most people didn't think about it for a long time. But all that time, Valve knew they had something good. They worked on Proton with open source developers in order to build a library of games that usually ran on Windows, but with Proton were able to run on Linux. They also made an entire new version of SteamOS, and that's when they released the Steam Deck. Proton now is in a state where you can at least run most games, and a lot of them run pretty good. Valve has said this new Steam machine is 6 times as powerful as the Steam Deck, which means it should be pretty good performance-wise. And honestly, I'm surprised with how small they are able to get this machine, and what's even more crazy is most of what's inside is the heatsink. Valve said when they were designing this new Steam machine, they started with the fan. Since they knew the amount of heat that they would need to displace, they could design the fan and then the rest of the box around it, and somehow managed to fit it all in a 6x6x6 cube. Specs-wise, the Steam machine has a semi-custom 6-core AMD Zen 4 CPU, 16 gigs of DDR5 RAM, and a semi-custom RDNA 3 GPU with 8 gigs of VRAM. Digital Foundry has some more info on this and has said that the GPU should be comparable somewhere in between the AMD RX 6600 XT and the RX 7600. But Valve has said that it might not be a direct comparison because of their custom software and power tuning. Valve has also said that most games on Steam should run at around 4K 60 FPS if you're willing to turn down some of the details and use a little bit of FSR upscaling, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. Most of the time when you're playing a game in 4K on a PlayStation or Xbox, it isn't actually rendered at 4K from the console itself. It's usually upscaled from a lower resolution like 1440p to make it easier on the hardware so it's not pushing it as hard, and sometimes it can't truly hit 4K because of the visuals of a game. The 8 gigs of VRAM is a little worrisome because several brand new games have been requiring a minimum of like 12 gigs of VRAM to run, or something similar, because of all the textures and everything else in the game. So hopefully Valve has thought this through, I'm assuming they have, but it just worries me because a lot of people have been trying to move away from just 8 gigabytes of VRAM in 2025. There will be 2 different models of the Steam machine. The first one comes with 512GB M.2 2230 drive, but there is room inside for a standard 2280 size drive. I'm not saying there's technically room if you want to try and cram it in there. There is literally a mounting hole for an M.2 2280 drive. So that definitely helps with us being able to go out and buy our own SSDs and replace the one in the system maybe for a little bit cheaper and maybe a little more storage too. The other version of the Steam machine will come with 2 terabytes of storage if you're not the kind of person that wants to open up your device and tinker with it. What would have been smart is for them to make a version of the Steam machine that has 32 gigabytes of RAM, since they're already making multiple SKUs of the device. They could have done one with 16 gigs of RAM and 512 of storage, 16 gigs of RAM and 2 terabytes of storage, and 32 gigs of RAM and 2 terabytes of storage. They could have also done one with 32 gigs of RAM and 512 of storage, but at that point people would probably just want the 2 terabytes of storage if they would already be upgrading the RAM. Speaking of upgrading the RAM though, I have heard that if you open up the Steam machine, it uses laptop RAM, so you should be able to upgrade it to 32 gigs for yourself even if Valve doesn't do a SKU like that. I understand they're trying to be price conscious and make it so that the Steam machine isn't too expensive, and I think that's good. With all the prices of other consoles going up and the price of RAM going up, it would be nice to see Valve undercut the other manufacturers just a little bit. They need to get the price of this thing right. If it's priced too high, it might not sell very well, or if it's priced the same as a PS5 Pro but doesn't perform the same, that will probably be an issue. The last thing they announced was the Steam Frame. This is a brand new ARM-powered headset that somehow is running SteamOS. Valve has been working on this thing called FEX emulation layer that's kind of like Proton but for ARM devices. So basically it'll be emulating Linux to use Proton to run window games. That probably sounds really complicated, and it is. It's something I don't entirely understand because I don't really keep up with the VR scene, especially hardware-wise. What I have heard is great about the Steam Frame is that it'll be using pancake lenses, which are not only not reflective, which is really good, but it also allows the headset itself to be thinner. Each lens has a resolution of 2160 by 2160 and is LCD rather than OLED. I'm guessing they went with LCD in order to keep the price down, which is good, even though OLED would have been pretty cool. The refresh rate goes from a minimum of 72 all the way up to 144 Hz, and they said that it has a large field of view of up to 110 degrees. It says up to because there's a little gasket you can put in the headset to push it away from your face a little bit if you need to wear glasses inside the headset. But the good news is Valve has said that they're working on a way to put prescription lenses into the Steam Frame so you won't have to wear your glasses inside the headset. The headset uses inside-out camera-based tracking, which means that it has cameras on the outside that'll be watching for things like the controllers or maybe the Steam controller if you have that connected, so it'll be able to track how you're moving that way. Some people don't like that as much as what Valve originally did with the Valve Index, where you had these little lighthouse-looking camera stations that you'd put up around the room you were in, and those would track the headset. I don't personally have a preference on that, and I'm pretty sure most, if not all, new VR headsets these days have inside-out tracking, which is nice because I don't want to have to hook up multiple devices to use my VR. The Steam Frame will also have an SD card slot, so you can have a micro SD card with all your games on it, and you can move that between your Steam Deck, your Steam Machine, and your Steam Frame. So then you don't have to install all your games multiple times on multiple devices. You can just do one install on an SD card and plug the thing into all your devices and it'll just work, or at least that's the plan. Yes, I did say that right. You can play your games on the Steam Frame itself, not just streamed on a separate gaming PC. The Steam Frame has a Snapdragon 8 Gen 3, 16 gigs of RAM, and it has both 256 or 1 terabyte UFS storage options. And of course, you can expand that with a micro SD card. There's a 21.6 watt-hour battery that's on the back of the headset strap, which not only helps balance out the weight of the headset on your head, but also helps to make the headset itself thinner, since they don't also have to cram a battery inside of it. If you are playing a game on the headset that requires more power than the headset is able to give you, you are able to stream it from a separate PC to the Stream Frame, but that's a conversation for another time, another video, since there's a lot more to talk about with this VR headset. The Steam Frame controllers will also have a split gamepad layout so that they work with your whole Steam library. Yes, not only can you play VR games on the Steam Frame since it's a VR headset, but you can also play non-VR games in your VR. Valve is really shaking up the market with all these devices, and I can't wait till they release next year. Let me know what you think about the Steam controller, the Steam Machine, and the Steam Frame down in the comments below. Will you be picking any of them up? I personally will probably start out with the controller and the gabecube, and I might pick up the VR eventually, but what are your thoughts on all this? If you want to see more content just like this, go ahead and like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.